So if we think about range of motion and mobility, and what we say is, I have a restriction or I have a limitation in, the implication there is that there is a point at which you can become no longer limited, right? There, the implication is that while you may be in a current state of limitation, there's this implication that there's somewhere that we need to get to. And once we get there, it'll be all good. It'll be fine and dandy. And not only that, but if we move in the direction of, you know, toward less limited, that conditions within our body, performance, hypertrophy, strength, name the variable, that all those things will somehow improve, along with this lack of limitation. And so we're going to say something?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond that. I think a lot of times the promise is that you will be a better human in a philosophical and like spiritual way.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you'll acquire a sense of physical enlightenment, much like all of the monks that can sit crisscross applesauce. So I think that's a very important point to make explicitly, which is that the danger of using the kind of word choice that we're describing is that without realizing it, what you're kind of doing is it's kind of like saying, I have a limited amount of money, right? Uh, and we see this, I would say in a vast majority of wealthy people I know, like the sort of end goal just kind of continues to move forward with wherever you're at, so if I have 5 degrees of dorsiflexion this week, and I get 6 next week, however you're possibly measuring that, then the next week you'll want 7, and so on and so forth. So, obviously people can logically conclude when you ask them these kinds of things, like, where do you see it ending? Like, it's not like people are going to be like, oh, I'll be happy when I have this range of motion. That's not what they say, because normally the thought process doesn't, I think, go to that end. It's more just like, there's this sense of like subjective restrictions, usually it's pain or what people describe as tightness. And that to me is the impetus. So when we talk about mobility, the whole mobility conversation to me really comes down to, like, how does a person feel? Because if a person doesn't get the feeling that, like, they're in pain or they're tight, like, if you never even introduce the idea of mobility to someone, it's not something that they're not, it's not like a goal that people are actively trying to move in the direction of. It's kind of like this thing that the culture of lifting just throws at people. And naturally, people just kind of accept as truth, in that, if I become more mobile, if I become more flexible, if I use more range, then I will be better in all the ways we described, and spiritually, as we discussed as well. So I'm going to give an anecdote, but before I do you have just anything that comes to mind in relationship to that conversation to add?
Yeah, I mean, in relationship to that last piece, just in the 20 years of being around, this industry, my observation is that usually the people who feel the tightest are the ones who are doing the most stretching to begin with. And the
Yeah.
people who are, quote unquote, the tightest don't really notice it until other people tell them that they're tight. It's like the emperor has no clothes kind of thing.
Yeah.
These are always the ones that just like can't get a breath until they stretch their hamstrings. Meanwhile, I have 65-year-old guys with like that can't raise their arm above their nose and they have no idea. They just, arch their back to get a can of soup.
Yeah. Exactly. 100%.